With our lips let us sing one confession, with our hearts hold to one truth alone. For he has erased our transgressions, he's claimed us, called us his own, his very own. We're the people of God, called by his name, called from the dark, from shame. But holy race saves everyone because of the blood of Christ Jesus the Son. We're so spirits of darkness, so you will know where we stand. We are his servants, purchased with scars, bought by the blood of the Lamb, the blood of the Lamb. We're the people of God, called by his name, called from the dark, delivered from shame. One holy race saves everyone because of the blood of Christ Jesus the Son. Bless the people of God, called by his name, called from the dark and delivered from shame. One holy race saves everyone because of the blood of Christ Jesus the Son. Because of the blood of Christ Jesus the Son. Man of sorrows, what a name for the Son of God who came, ruined sinners to reclaim. Hallelujah, what a Savior. Lifted up was he to die. It is finished was his cry. Now in heaven, exalted high. Hallelujah, what a Savior. Hallelujah, what a Savior. Hallelujah, what a friend. Hallelujah, what a Savior. Hallelujah, what a friend. When he comes, our glorious King, all his ransom home to bring. In anew, the song we'll sing. Hallelujah, what a Savior. Hallelujah, what a Savior. Hallelujah, what a friend. Hallelujah, what a Savior. Hallelujah, what a friend. Hallelujah, what a friend.
Hi, I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ, and I struggle with trust issues and sometimes some anger issues. My name is Laura, and I'd like to share with you the 8 principles based on the Beatitudes. Number 1, realize I am not God. I admit that I am powerless to control my tendency to do the wrong thing and that my life is unmanageable. Happy are those who know they are spiritually poor. Matthew 5:3. Earnestly believe that God exists, that I matter to him, and that he has the power to help me recover. Happy are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Matthew 5:4. Consciously choose to commit all my life and will to Christ's care and control. Happy are the meek. Matthew 5:5. Openly examine and confess my faults to myself, to God, and to someone I trust. Happy are the pure in heart. Matthew 5:8. Voluntarily submit to every change God wants to make in my life and humbly ask him to remove my character defects. Happy are those whose greatest desire is to do what God requires. Matthew 5:6. Number 6, evaluate all my relationships. Offer forgiveness to those who have hurt me and make amends for harm I've done to others, except for when to do so would harm them or others. Happy are the merciful. Matthew 5:7. And happy are the peacemakers. Matthew 5:9. Number 7, reserve a daily time with God for self-examination, Bible reading, and prayer in order to know God and his will for my life and to gain the power to follow his will. And number 8, yield myself to God to be used to bring this good news to others, both by my example and by my words. Happy are those who are persecuted because they do what God requires. Matthew 5:10. Thank you.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. Was grace that brought my body, and grace will lead me home. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. His grace hath brought me Savior's far, and grace will lead me home. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've known best days to sing God's praise. And when we first begun, amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. I
I'm Thelma. Just kidding. I'm Tiffany. A grateful believer in Jesus, and I struggle with codependency, self-worth, and trust issues. I've been nervous about this all week. So I'm just going to go ahead and start. These lights are so bright. Good gracious. I grew up in a home with both parents. My dad worked nights to provide for our family, and I missed him very much. My mom was my primary caregiver with my dad working, and I remember my mom being just very manipulative. I didn't realize what this was until later in life, and I remember her constantly comparing me to my friends and to other people as well. We didn't regularly attend church when I was growing up, but I would go with my Mimi or I would go with my grandpa when I entered into my teenage years. I was saved and baptized at 12 years old, and after being saved, I started struggling with depression, suicidal thoughts, self-worth, and codependency issues, which followed me into my adulthood. At 12 years old, so many responsibilities were placed on my shoulders. My mom was working out of town a lot, and the relationship between my parents became very strained. Staying between home, my Mimi's, and the coast where my mom's office was made life chaotic, to say the least. With my parents' schedules, I had to take on the role of an adult, taking care of our home and my baby brother, all the while going to school and trying to be a kid. As a result of missing my dad and just not feeling I was enough, I sought out validation from relationships with guys. Once any of these unhealthy relationships were over, the feelings of worthlessness and rejection reared their heads once again. Alcohol became a way of numbing those feelings of hurt and worthlessness. At 15 years old, I started dating the man that would eventually be my first husband. This was an off-and-on relationship for 3 years. I was terrified of committing to a relationship after seeing the chaos in my parents' marriage. When he finally proposed, I said yes in spite of the fact that I was terrified of ending up like my mom and dad. He left for boot camp, and soon after I found out I was pregnant. This obviously wasn't planned, but I was excited. I told my mom and a close friend, and my mom told my dad, even though I begged her not to. And my friend told her husband, who in turn told my fiance. I had planned on having my baby, however, my dad was adamant that I would not be having this child. And if I chose to, I would not be allowed to stay in our home. The father of my baby was gone. He was at boot camp and wouldn't be home for a couple more months. I had no money and nowhere to go. I gave in to my dad's demand and I had an abortion. I was heartbroken and I was devastated. Because of my faith, I knew this was wrong. When my fiance found out that I was no longer pregnant, I lied and I told him that I'd had a miscarriage. We were married in 1991. We had a couple of awesome kids. A couple of years after we were married, we started attending church. We actually started attending church where the kids are tonight, the old temple. This is where I had my first experience of starting to heal. One morning in the ladies' group that I attended, the topic of abortion came up and quickly became very obvious that these women had very strong opinions and hated abortion and were condemning anyone who had had one, not knowing they were talking about me. I broke down and I cried, and I told them that I had had an abortion. So tonight I want to share with you what one of those ladies shared with me. She told me, she said, "Tiffany, God forgave you for this as soon as you asked Him. You need to forgive yourself." And I did. For the next 10 years, we were moving along, just living life as a typical young family. That all changed when I found out he was having an affair with a family friend. She was also a caregiver to our children. We separated and the kids and I moved out of our home, and I moved back close to my mom and dad. I thought I had everything under control. I mean, I was hurt, but I was fine. It didn't take long for me to realize I was not fine. I broke down and I mentally lost it. I trusted this person and she ended up with my husband. To make matters worse, not long after I moved out, she moved in. I was hurt, angry, and I felt like I wasn't good enough yet again. I ended up in the hospital after overdosing on medication and cutting my wrist. 1 week in mental health and I was sent home. By this point in my life, I'd been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and seeing a doctor and a therapist regularly. So I did pretty well after that, dealing with things. My mom was really sick, so trying to help take care of her and visiting her in the hospital during her many stays kept me quite occupied, along with taking care of my 2 children. In June, I lost my mom, and I was heartbroken yet again. I was only 29, and I needed my mom, especially with all that was going on in my life, but she was gone. Alcohol became an escape. It was where I wanted to run and hide. I would drink during the day, I would drink at night, and honestly, I don't know if anyone knew or if they just didn't say anything about it. After several months of drinking like this, something finally clicked, and I knew that I needed to stop. I'd been picking up my children from school when I was drinking, and I can only guess that God was convicting me. Now, I didn't completely quit drinking, but I did stop drinking when I knew I had to get my children. By June of 2004, I was divorced, and I had been in a dating relationship that ended badly. I'd known this man since high school, and our relationship lasted for a little over a year. During this time, I found out he was struggling with an addiction, and then later that he had gotten another woman pregnant during our relationship. Even through all of this, I wanted to try and make it work. I could fix him if he would let me, and if you don't know, that is codependency. As much as I wanted to, and I tried, I couldn't fix him, and his struggle with addiction finally took its toll on the relationship and me as well. So what did I do? Well, I found someone else to try and fix, yet again with someone struggling with addiction, and it wasn't long before this man's addiction took over his life and it took over mine. If I could just be perfect, a good Christian, make him happy, well, then he wouldn't do that, right? None of that worked. He became so unsafe, I had my dad give me a shotgun in case I needed to protect myself from him. At least that's what I told myself. Now, if I'm being completely honest, there was a part of me that thought about killing myself when I asked my dad for that gun. I was making horrible choices that had been hurting my children, they were hurting my dad, and they were hurting myself. How many times were my children going to be hurt by someone I chose to have in my life, only to get their hearts broken? Hadn't I lost enough already? I mean, I'd lost my husband to our friend, I'd lost my mom, I lost my first relationship with someone that I loved after my husband and I divorced, and now this relationship was toxic for me and my children. My relationship with God wasn't where it needed to be. I wasn't in church other than sporadically. I was hurt and I was angry, and I didn't mind lashing out at others because of the pain in my life. I hit bottom. I was tired. I was tired of losing people, tired of my trust being betrayed, and tired of hurting my family. I believed they would be better off without me, and I prayed and I asked God, please forgive me for what I was about to do, and please just take me home. I wrote a note, took a bottle full of pills, and placed that shotgun to my chest and pulled the trigger. My brother found me, and he called 911. At the hospital, he was told that I would never make it, but they were going to airlift me to Chapel Hill so they could say they had done everything they could. But he was told at the hospital to just go home and pick out a suit because he would be attending my funeral. As you can see, I'm still here. It's certainly by the grace of God. It was a long and painful physical recovery process, but here I am. My mental health recovery consisted of intensive outpatient treatment for many months, and today I still see a mental health provider and will continue this throughout my life as part of my recovery. The verse I focused on throughout this time and through that recovery of physical healing was Isaiah 40:30-31. Even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. I had allowed Satan to fill my head with the lie that I was worthless and that everyone would be better off without me. I'll never know or understand the deep pain I caused my family during this time. And so now, if you are struggling tonight, I'm talking to you. I am pleading with you to talk to someone and to not believe the lies of the enemy. as he only comes to kill, steal, and destroy. You are worthy of love. Your life is very valuable, and those that love you would not be better off without you. Although I was attending church, I wasn't living a very godly lifestyle. I lived through another divorce and remarried in 2013 to a man that, little did I know, at the time was struggling with addiction. A couple of years into that marriage, I made a very conscious decision to get drunk. I had been deeply hurt by actions behind my husband's addiction, and I was at the end of my rope, I felt like. I just wanted to numb everything. I didn't want to feel anything. And I decided alcohol was just what would take that away and help me forget for a little while anyway. This was not a very good decision at all. Each time my husband had taken off in his addiction before, I'd go get a bottle of liquor and drink until I passed out. So why not now? This was usually a monthly thing, so why not? That night after dinner, I told him, I'm getting drunk. You're going to have to take care of me for a change. And I did just exactly that. After about an hour of consuming way too much alcohol, I decided we needed to leave, or at least I think I was the one, who knows. I headed to the car to move it from in front of the pub that we were at. He came out, and I don't know what he said, but I put my car in reverse, and I ran over him. And technically it was his leg, but I ran over my husband. The next thing I knew, the cops were there. My husband was in the back of an ambulance, and I was being taken to jail for a DUI. I had never been in trouble with the law before, except for maybe a speeding ticket. And I was scared. I ended up spending the night in jail, and my dad showed up to get me around 6 that morning. And we headed to the hospital to find my husband, who was still in the ER. Losing my license, costly attorney fees, fees for reinstating my license, fees for the machine on the car for a year while I only had a limited driving privilege, and paying to do community service all certainly made me think about my actions. I got the ticket in October of 2015. And thank God Celebrate Recovery had come to our church. It was the beginning stages, and anyone who wanted to be a part of leading in CR had to go through a step study. Honestly, even with all of that I had been through, I was getting involved with CR to help my husband. I knew they would tell me what to do to fix him. He needed help, and I knew CR could tell me how to do that. I soon learned after getting into this step study that this kind of thinking was codependency. The only person I can fix is myself. Now, don't get me wrong, sometimes I still try to fix him and other people as well. About once a month, I'd start getting comfortable in his recovery, only to have the wind knocked out of me when he might relapse. I would go look for him in horrible neighborhoods, hoping to find him and drag him home. This is also codependency and control issues. I thought I was helping him. I wouldn't allow myself to go and do things for fear of him going out and using. I have since learned that I can't make that choice for him, no matter my geographical location. That decision is his alone. I have to look to my Savior, Jesus Christ, to help me through any and every situation. I've learned that I can only control myself and my actions. Working through that first step study was life-changing for me. The most important thing I learned was that God truly loves me, even with the bad things I've done and the poor choices that I have made. He loves me, and He sent His Son to die on the cross for me, and He will take care of me no matter what happens around me. Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. I have learned that it's okay for me to have a life of my own and to let others live their life, though I do still struggle with this. I can't control my husband, nor can I control anyone else. I am not God. Principle 1, realize I am not God. I admit that I am powerless to control my tendency to do the wrong thing and that my life is unmanageable. I wish I could tell you since getting involved with CR that my life and marriage are now perfect, but I can't because that isn't reality. If anybody has a perfect marriage, please come see me. I want to take notes from you. Since that first step study, I've still found myself in seasons of life that I don't like very much. I've struggled with trying to love someone who hasn't always been safe for me, and sometimes it's heartbreaking. I've struggled with old thought patterns and even some behaviors. I have, however, in the last year, and especially in the last few months, seen God's hand in my life and circumstances. I have wondered how I was going to be able to take care of certain things, whether it be physically or financially, and God has always worked it out and provided. My husband and I are working on ourselves and our marriage. Something I know for certain is that God is faithful. My regular CR meetings have helped me to discuss my hurts with others and to stop being ashamed. I am surrounded by forever family that I could have only met in CR. They love me and they love my messy life. All I have to do is reach out to them with a call or a text. We have to reach out and not isolate, and sometimes that's hard. Fear of judgment or guilt of laying my junk on already burdened people is something that I still struggle with. But I try not to let Satan fill my head with that, and I hope and pray that you won't let him fill your head with that either. Remember, Satan is a liar, and God created us for community, so we don't have to do things alone. I've learned to reach out to my CR sisters. I'm still learning to talk to my husband and not walk on eggshells all the time. I've learned it's okay for me to communicate my needs to him. I no longer look for validation or self-worth in my relationships, which has allowed me to step back and let my husband be responsible for his recovery. I am continuing to work on my self-worth and not comparing myself to others by trusting what God says about me and continuing a step study that I facilitate and lead at the women's prison in Raleigh. I've grown in my leadership role at CR and Temple. Even though I still have struggles, I am working through. God is using me right where I am. To the newcomer, I would like to say first, you are so loved. God loves you no matter what you may have done. And second, Celebrate Recovery can help you gain victory if you will work the steps and utilize what it teaches and apply it to your life. And 3, open share groups are great for sharing, gaining insight from others, finding a sponsor and/or accountability partners. Things may not change overnight, but they can change as long as you put in the work and don't give up. Thanks for letting me share.
Hello. Join me, please, in the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference, living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as a pathway to peace, taking as Jesus did this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that you will make all things right if I surrender to your will, so that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with you in the next. Amen.
Hey y'all, got a few announcements. Coming up on June 11th, we are going to be coming back live at Houston Northwest Church for our CR live group, large group meetings. That's going to start June 11th. That's going to be from 7. We're not going to have dinner. There's going to be certain things that we're going to need to do. Also, ladies, tonight, Zoom at 7 o'clock and guys, Zoom at 8 o'clock. Love you all. Hope you have a great evening.